Hi everyone, thank you for tuning into the podcast today. Before we begin, I just wanted to go over a couple theories and ideas so that everyone listening has a better idea of the materials that will be talked about in the podcast today. The first thing I want to talk about is identity, and the information comes from the article Who Needs Identity by Stuart Hall. Every individual has an identity. Every person, whether they think about it or not, identifies themselves in a specific way. Hall believes that identities are attachments to the subject that can change over time. The next idea I want to talk about is representation, and this information comes from The Work of Representation by Stuart Hall. Hall believes that representation is how individuals of a culture produce meaning through communication. Representation, like identity, can change, and it will change throughout different cultures. The next ideas I want to talk about are from Mass Media Influences on Sexuality by Jane D. Brown. The first theory is setting and framing theory. This is a theory where the media tells you what is important and how to think about a specific topic. Basically, the more you see a topic or image referring to sexual behavior, the more you're going to think it's important. The next theory is the cultivation theory. This focuses on long-term effects of television. The more time you spend being captivated by the television screen, the more you're going to adapt the behaviors that you're seeing on television into your own life. The next materials come from Stereotype or Success, Primetime Television's Portrayals of Gay Male, Lesbian, and Bisexual Characters. This article is by Amber B. Raley and Jennifer L. Lucas. In this article, they talk about 4 stages of representation, which are non-representation, ridicule, regulation, and respect. A group can move back and forth between the different stages depending on how they're being represented. The next thing is the 3 periods of television portrayal: the stereotypic age, the new awareness, and stabilization. Stereotypic age refers to characters being shown only with their stereotypes. New awareness refers to LGBTQ+ community having lead and supporting roles in shows. Stabilization refers to where a cast of a show would be mainly LGBTQ+. Finally, I just want to say this format of the podcast was inspired by the article Using Podcasts to Support Communication Skills Development, a case study for content format preferences among postgraduate research students. And this article is by Bob Lawler and Rosen Donnelly. They state that having slides where the key information is shown on the slide while a voiceover explains smaller details and specifics is the preferred format for podcasts for graduate students. Taking that information, I thought it'd be useful for undergraduates as well. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the podcast. Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today I have with me Andrew Sandy. Andrew, just to start off, I want you to tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm 22. I'm a senior at UWM. I'm studying communications and then journalism, advertising, and media studies with a focus in PR.
Okay.
Currently looking for jobs.
Awesome.
Graduate in May.
Yeah, I think all of us right now are kind of scattering looking for jobs.
Yeah.
It's just crazy right now. But since we're going to be talking about media and culture, I kind of just want to narrow it down a little bit so you can better understand the path we're going for the point of this podcast. So media and culture can be narrowed down to sexuality, and then from there, identity and representation can both go into sexuality. So I just want to talk with you a little bit about that.
Okay.
So one of the first questions I have is, how do you identify, and when was the first time you realized you did identify that way?
Sure. I identify as gay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the first time I realized I was gay was when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of when puberty set in.
Yeah.
All the changes of life happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and was it something that you were public about from the beginning, or
no? I didn't tell anyone. I started telling friends my freshman year of college.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like after high school, it's kind of everyone knew, but I was just I should tell someone, whatever, tell my friends, I don't really care. And then it wasn't until I was a junior that I told my parents.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of just different to have it come from you rather than people just assume, I guess, about it. So it's completely understandable. And so every person identifies a certain way. So what are your opinions on identifying and the overarching need for people to always put labels on something?
I guess for some people, putting labels on your sexuality and how you identify, it helps. I feel it's more personal. It helps you get through it and
Mm-hmm.
realize who you are. But I don't know, it doesn't really matter. I think it's from an outside perspective of having to label someone.
Mm-hmm.
no one's business who you are, I guess, like what you're into.
Yeah, I guess what I see a lot, and I feel like it's mostly on social media, is people who, you know, oh, this gives me like gay vibes, this gives me bi vibes, and it's just like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of just like, so what? Like, you don't have to dig into their lives.
Yeah.
So that's just something that I always see.
I think it's different than when like someone who actually is gay or bi or whatever, like, I don't know, says something like that, when it's kind of like, if you're talking about social media, if you like look at like, I don't know, there's like on TikTok, like the straight boys that kiss their best friend, and they're like, I don't know. It's like different when it comes from a straight person versus like someone who actually identifies like what they're portraying.
Yeah, I was thinking of an example from TikTok. It was Dixie D'Amelio, and everyone was saying like, oh, like she's definitely bi, like just come out and say it already. And so she literally had to make a video coming out as straight because everyone was just so labels of, you know, it's getting to the point where I feel people just pushing too far for certain things. But, all right, so I want to shift a little bit onto the topic of representation. So representation is how individuals produce meaning through communication, and you know we'll be talking about both later, but identity and representation kind of go hand in hand. Both change, and they can be viewed as a process. Like your representation of the groups you're in can change, your identity can change, stuff like that. So as you get involved with different groups and cultures, it shapes you and your identity relative to those groups. So I just want to talk to you about the LGBTQ plus culture and kind of the language, signs, and images that you feel, you know, produce specific meanings.
What do you mean?
So it could be like
the flag.
So yeah, like the flag would be one.
I wouldn't say like images, but like events, kind of like pride, I guess. Well then, I guess besides the flag, something would be like, I don't know, just like representation. Like when I think signs, I would think like advertisements or something. Like we're actually seeing someone that you identify with within the media. So I would think like, I don't know, advertisements like that depicts a diverse group of people that like aren't just for pride, I guess. Like June is the month when companies get on the bandwagon of like showing
pride flags and stuff like that.
And then otherwise it's not. But
and then so I know when we talked about identity earlier, you had mentioned it was around like the age of 12, and so I feel like from that age going on, social media is kind of, you know, a prevalent thing in, you know, middle school and high school all the way up to college where we are now. So the reason that I want to bring up social media is because I know, well, I'm sure you know that there's, you know, sexual and relationship norms in media, and that's something I want to focus on talking about next. So by media, I mean television, social media, movies, and I know something we can talk about is an example from our comm textbooks, how, you know, they have these norms that don't really fit anything besides like a heterosexual norm. So I kind of just want to talk about, like, as part of the LGBTQ plus culture, do you ever feel like you're violating any of these norms just because you identify it a certain way?
Yeah, I guess like within the gay community there's a lot of like subcategories with how you identify. So like there's like there's like twink, like really skinny like gay guys. They call them like twinks or whatever. And like there's like the saying like no fats, no femmes, no Asians. Like people are like really like bad within it. So I don't know, I guess there's like a lot of things that like you think you fit into when it comes to the gay community, and then there's someone behind you saying like, well no, you're this. Like yeah, you're gay, but you're this, and if you're not this, then like they don't want to talk to you or something like that. Yeah, so kind of seems like in the representation part of it, like even though, you know, if you identify as gay, you're also getting like subcategorized into other things. And if you don't fit the category that someone like prefers, then they won't talk to you or something like that. Okay, so I just want to, I know we kind of just talked about your example, but something I wanted to bring up because I thought it was interesting is our nonverbal class. We just had an assignment where it was, oh, like here are all these you know, ways you can tell if a woman's flirting with you, and in my discussion post I was like how does this work for anyone besides someone who's heterosexual? And I think like a lot of people in our class touched on that, but
I think it just it sticks out to me because it's like, okay, it's 2020, the textbook was probably made a couple years ago probably, and they're still using research, and I mean, like, they probably need to, but it's the fact that, you know, they're not specifying and saying like, oh, you know, like, here's other research that's leading to something else. It's very stuck on this, you know, heterosexual norm, and, you know, so in that case a lot of people can't relate to it.
No. Yeah, that textbook, when I read it, I was like, this is like, whatever, I guess it makes sense for what they were offering, but they didn't, like, so they showed like the heterosexual woman, but they didn't say anything else about like anyone else. Like, they gave it one perspective. So.
Yeah, definitely. So that was something that just stood out to me that I wanted to discuss. But besides that, are there any other, you know, examples of, you know, you seeing something in social media or movies, television, where you feel like because of the norms that you're seeing, you're like violating anything by just being yourself?
Yes, like, I don't know, media is mostly like straight for the most part, so it's seeing something like, I watch RuPaul's Drag Race a lot, like, that's my favorite show because it like shows everyone within like the community, and that's not something that you see like normally on TV. So
it's nice to actually watch
seeing something you identify with rather than just like a show with people you like don't really connect with
like a cis white male and you know, the average story and everything like that. So do you ever feel like you need to alter any content that you would put onto social media because it may not hold up to, you know, the sexual or relationship norms that are on there?
Well, I don't have a boyfriend, so I don't have to worry about posting anything like that, but I don't know, I kind of don't care with social media at this point. Like, if I post a picture, I don't, my whole extended family, like, not everyone in my family like knows that I'm gay, so when I post pictures, a lot of my friends are girls, so they'll like be like, oh, like, is that your girlfriend? I'm like, no, just my friend, but like, I don't really care.
Yeah, and I feel like especially with family, they always have to dig into everything more. It's like, oh, who's that and how do you know them? So it's like, you know, like, why does it matter, sort of thing. But alright, so I want to go into more of the topic in depth. So generally, sexual content in the mass media has an influence, so the more you see a topic or image referring to a sexual behavior, the more you're going to think it's important, and that's just because of the fact that you're like seeing it so often. It influences you that, oh yeah, this is important because I'm seeing it so much. So you know, we see in the straight culture the ideas surrounding sexual beliefs or the act of sexual behavior, but how often do you see that sort of stuff for the LGBTQ plus culture?
I guess when you do see it, like you mean like sex and stuff?
Well, just like sexual, like I guess like it's kind of hard to describe it because like obviously you're not just seeing straight sex on social media, but just kind of like sexual beliefs, like in the sense of like straight culture, like there's those like weird Twitter accounts where it's kind of like all about like sex and like, oh, do this to her and like, you know, stuff like that. So it's like weirdly popular with straight culture, but I'm wondering like how often you see stuff about
I guess like what I follow on Twitter and stuff is obviously different than what a straight man or something would follow on Twitter. So like, I think like social media wise, it's tailored to what you like prefer to follow and stuff. So if you choose to follow like people that are more like sexually like adventurous or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
So do follow a few people that are more like open with themselves.
Yeah, I feel like it definitely like varies because obviously like you're not gonna really see that stuff on Facebook, but I feel like there's the Twitter accounts, and I know like Tumblr used to be like super popular for that kind of stuff, and you know, like things are shifting, and I feel like, you know, just like terms of what's the norm on these social media.
I think like sexuality and like sex wise, people that like in the gay community, a lot of like gay people have like their OnlyFans accounts. It's like whatever, but I don't know, it's kind of like they sexualize themselves, and like that's how they not like find value, but like they're able to profit off of like their sexuality because people want to view it or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I know people who have OnlyFans accounts, and it's kind of just like, almost a sense of like, oh yeah, like why not? Like if you would post like risque stuff
Yeah.
in the first place, like, oh, I might as well get paid for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of people are just, their mindset's kind of changing on that whole thing. But so there's another theory, and it's like the more time you spend being captivated by a television screen, the more you're gonna adopt or adapt the behaviors you see to your own life. So are there examples of media, whether it's like certain shows, movies, things you see on social media that have adapted your behavior?
Well, one show, what I mentioned, RuPaul's Drag Race, that show's like responsible for a lot of people that like are exploring their like gender identity and stuff like that. And for me, that show has been like, I don't know, I love watching it, like I said, because of all the expressions, but I've like tried drag before and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's just like fun to like mess around with.
Yeah, so like do you feel like if you wouldn't have watched that show like during like your like process throughout this, like do you think you'd be so like open to like trying drag and stuff like that, or do you feel like it really opened a door for you to?
Probably, yeah. I think it opened a door because like you see someone on TV like that and it's like, well, if they can do it, so can I.
Yeah.
So.
Comparing like, because what is RuPaul's Drag Race on? Is it on like cable TV, or is it just on what channel?
It's on VH1.
Okay.
They keep switching. Like originally it was originally on like it was called Logo TV.
Okay.
So it's like an LGBT like channel basically. And then it's gotten bigger and bigger over the years. So now it's on VH1.
Okay.
And like they've branched off and like series wise, so they have like All Stars, and Friday night is Celebrity Drag Race premieres.
Okay.
But so that like those have all been on VH1, but now they're even like moving further. Like All Stars is gonna be on Showtime.
Okay.
So like they're branching out to larger like networks and stuff. But
yeah. Which is good, because I feel like the reason why I asked if it was on cable is just because I feel like now I see more like progressive, I guess is the best word, like shows on like Netflix and Hulu and stuff like that. So I was just curious to see like, because I haven't watched it in a long time, so I couldn't remember what it was on. So there's 4 stages of representation in the media for minority groups, and LGBTQ plus can kind of be categorized into that minority group. And so the stages of representation, it goes non-representation, so nothing at all. Ridicule, which is like they're on there, but you know they're being ridiculed, like kind of like poked fun of. Regulation is kind of like, okay, like it's the attitude and respect is getting better, and then like respect is like, yes, this is normal sort of thing. So groups can move back and forth between the stages, and depending on the type of media, like what would you say is like the norm for where LGBTQ plus members are at? Like in my experience, I feel like social media, it's kind of like getting more to like the regulation stage. Like I feel like, you know, it's normal to see it on my feed, but I feel like there's still people who, you know, always have to say something in the comments and stuff like that. So I was just wondering what your opinion was on all that.
I think social media wise, it's like pretty normal to see it now. It's kind of like the place where people go. Like when I think of like Twitter, that's, I don't know, like it's all over the place kind of. But like TV wise and stuff like that, it probably falls somewhere in the middle.
Between like a ridicule and regulation sort of thing.
Like there's shows, but like there's always like the gay character that like, I don't know, you fall back on kind of.
Like the overly flamboyant,
stuff like that. I mean, like movie wise, there's been movies, but not that many. So I guess somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and so besides the representation, there's also 3 periods of television portrayal, and there's the stereotypic age, the new awareness, and stabilization. So stereotypic age is kind of what we talked about with like the overly flamboyant, feminine character. Like, you know, they always refer back to those stereotypes for, you know, the characters in the show. And then new awareness can, you know, kind of refer to there's an increase of lead roles, but like it's, you know, they're not completely all, you know, LGBTQ plus characters, and that's where stabilization comes in, because that's where it's mainly all characters from LGBTQ plus community, and it's like, you know, they kind of take the lead. So basically it's like
moving forward in the process. So are there any shows that come to mind that like fit each category, where there's one where it's a stereotype, there's one where there's like like a lead role or two, and then one where it's completely gay characters?
I think stereotype one I could think of would be like Glee.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I don't remember the characters' names, but I can like picture him.
Oh,
Like
Kurt?
yeah. Like he's like it's like a show that's like accepting of that, but it's also like that's like who he is, and that's like the stereotypes kind of like way, I guess.
Yeah, because I guess I
like
never
a
really thought
higher
about
pitched,
it.
like a higher pitched voice,
Mm-hmm.
like in Glee Club, dresses like very like nice and together, and like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, because
Is bullied because he's gay.
Yeah, I used to watch that show when I was younger, and I guess I never really thought about it that way, but like they could have made like, they did the overly flamboyant thing when they necessarily didn't have to.
Yeah.
That's just like something to
Like the
call
show,
out.
like I don't know, it wasn't bad.
No, I
Like,
still
what
like
they
it.
did. I mean, like what they did was, like it kind of makes sense. Like I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
What's the other one? The middle one?
New Awareness, where there's like a lead role, like of one or two like lead characters who would be considered like LGBTQ plus, or like supporting roles too.
Like Modern Family.
Yeah.
Like the two dads or whatever.
Yeah. And then for stabilization, would you say that RuPaul would be a good example of that? Or is not everyone gay who's on that show?
Well, actually, I mean, I don't know. It's like a good like diverse identity. Like I've been watching like Drag Race UK, and there's a contestant on there who's identifies as, I don't know if straight or bi or whatever, but like has a girlfriend and does drag.
Okay.
And like his girlfriend's like considered like drag queen too, but it's called like a bio queen.
Okay.
So it's like someone who does drag that's like identifies as a woman, but like does drag. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess I should correct myself, because there are probably not just gay people on RuPaul, but also like bi and identify other ways too. So
like gender fluid.
Yeah.
Like, on the newest season, there's someone who just like on the show came out as like gender fluid.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. Andrew, before I end the podcast, do you have any questions for me?
No.
All right. Well, thanks so much for doing this with me, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.